Hey everybody, it's your boy John, coming at you from the White Claw factory. Working overtime today because there's a White Claw shortage. If you haven't read the story on CNN, too many people are consuming White Claws, including me. I've got way too many White Claws I'm consuming, but I see no sign of stopping anytime soon. But you're not here to hear about my mango goodness. You're here to look at Alt Hero, a review of a book that I am going to do right now. This was the first Comicsgate comic. It crowdfunded in 2017, made $250,000. Everybody jumped on board the Comicsgate bandwagon because this book was the one that was so successful. Not only that, but he's come out with the issues individually. This is a 6-issue volume, which will be, the crowdfund promised 12 issues. I'm sure it's going to go beyond that too. And each issue came out on Amazon and was given to backers as they came out. So feedback was given in between issues, adjustments were made. It's truly starting a comics company from the ground up, just like everybody really wanted, a real alternative to the comic industry. And they keep improving with each outing. So it's definitely something that's very exciting. Those books on Amazon, as they came out as single issues, reached #1 bestseller multiple times. So in addition to that crowdfund, they've done very well on Amazon. They beat out all the Marvel books. I loved when they beat out Miss Marvel, especially because watching Alt Hero as #1 and then Ms. Marvel, the Muslim book, fall to #2 was really fun. And I should do a brief comparison because I reviewed Cyberfrog yesterday. The two books right here, you can see the difference. Cyberfrog, little thin floppy, and Alt Hero, big, strong, and hard. So that's the difference between little and floppy and strong and hard right there. This book is very robust. It's got amazingly thick cover. This is like book novel hardcover. And a lot more pages obviously than this. And so you've got a lot to review and go on here. I'm going to try to keep it a little bit shorter because I got some criticism from my folks saying my review went too long. Unfortunately, this is a lot longer, so I'll do what I can on this one. My kids have actually thrown this book around and stepped on it already, and you see there's no damage. It's a very robust book. This is meant for keeping and reading multiple times. The paper is the paper that you would have on novels, so it's very thick, very strong. Also, does not wrinkle easily. It's a vast difference. And I also like the matte finish quality because the colors just are a little easier. You see, there's no sun glare or anything like that. There's no ink damage on the black parts. It just is printed very well. So this is a very high quality product. I would say out of all the books I've received, this is probably the second highest quality of actual physical book to Bigfoot Bill by Doug TenNapel. Bigfoot Bill had a little bit better because it had that cool little leather cover and it was a little more oversized than this. And so that was sweet. So I'll try to get to the story. Alt Hero actually is 2 books. So I'm going to kind of have to review it a little differently. And it's 6 issues. So in between those 2 books, there's a lot going on. You get some introduction books. These are the 2 stories, and each story, one occupies Europe and one is America. So there's an American front and a European front. They're really 2 different storylines, 100%. And because of that, I honestly would have preferred there be like Alt Hero Volume 1 and it'd be all American front, so I could just read the American front in one, and Alt Hero Volume 2 that's European front, that's all the European front, because they don't really go back and forth. I don't know if there's plans to sort of merge the 2 towards the end. There probably is. So there's something on that, but I can't judge that right now. Just stating what my preference would have been, just knowing what I know as of now. The first issue got a lot of reviews when it first came out. A lot of people savaged this issue, and somewhat rightly so. The art on it is a little stiff, and we'll get to that quickly. But what happened was, because he's releasing these issue after issue, Vox upgraded the artists overall, and he upgraded the colorist from issue 1 to 2, which goes further. And so it definitely gets better as it goes along, production-wise, which you'd expect from a company that's learning and actually paying attention to the customers. So I very much appreciate that. Unlike the Frog book, there's more than complete stories in here. Each issue really does have its own story. A couple of them get into, maybe it should have given a little bit more, and I'll go over to that once we get to those. But for the most part, there's a lot more hook here than there was for the Cyberfrog book, despite all the exposition and explaining going on in it. So let's get into this real quick. I am going to go issue by issue, and then I'll do an overview of the American front and the European front separately at the end. So here's book 1, Crackdown. As you see, this is a big book, so I'm going to have to stick it right here. And you see kind of the stiff art at the beginning, I like the dynamic figure, and I actually like this like holding her in the hand design. It does definitely it evokes what it's supposed to. Though the face looks kind of funky right there. So that's about what you're going to get from the art of the first issue. It's not going to be perfect, but it's not distracting for the most part. I'll call out where it is distracting. It's pretty rough in the first issue and then gets better from there. It starts right in action. Things are going down. They're taking down this gal. She's fighting. They're calling her a threat, and they go to and then she gets brought in before Captain Europa. And he basically gives her an ultimatum saying, we've got to use your powers for our global justice initiative, and we'll give you, we'll make you a superhero and pay you and all that. And there's a little bit of a fight. So she's a rebellious, spunky gal, and she has, she likes to smoke. She likes to pose in lewd modeling a little bit. And he tells her she's got to knock that off to do this, and she doesn't like that very much. She just wants to do her own thing. It's very good. She's a French girl, and here's the cool thing about Vox is when you see a character talking, you can almost read the dialogue and tell who's saying it. Her dialogue is very different than his dialogue, and it's phrased differently. It's like master dialogue wording, and it's nice because the characters are very distinct in that regard, so it makes them easier to tell apart. And that is just like pro writing chops right there. That is something that's worth noting because it's very, very hard to do that. And Vox does this down to the minor characters. So you don't just get this out of the big main characters. You get this in minor characters, and it's actually pretty cool to watch. It's a very, very finely done craft. And so here we go. She's trying on her stuff. Some of this art doesn't look all that bad. I think the coloring is a little, it needs improvement, especially in the first issue here. But people overhyped the art on this as being like a big train wreck. This is pretty standard fare for indie comics from what I've seen. Obviously, I don't think this would fly in a Marvel DC comic, but yeah, it's especially like this pinup right here, or splash page, whatever you want to call it, is pretty well done. So we go on. She meets the Justice Initiative. I think I like the opening in action, and then it takes way too long meeting all these Justice Initiative people. Multiple pages of just like exposition meeting them. I'm this person, and I'm this person, and I'm this person as talking heads. Big no-no in comics. And so, the first issue has some issues right there, several pages, which are kind of rough. Before we get back into the storyline again, where these guys are cracking down, as the title says, on hate speech, and they go after dudes posting and shit posting on the internet, and then scare them. Very funny. This is 2017, so this is before those European meme laws came into action when Vox wrote this. So he almost had a little bit of prophecy right here, which is very interesting to note. And that actually made for a pretty interesting and compelling issue right there. After the expositional parts, like I said, so you get some of the rough art in here. It's it's pretty rough. And they knew that, so they got better as it went on. It switches to a bunch of nationalists who are plotting to do something, and they go on the run, our European heroes, who are the globalists, track them down. Now, what's interesting is even though there's globalists versus nationalists, clearly, the globalists make a lot of mistakes, and the nationalists are a little more smarter about things. Again, this is just distracting art, unfortunately. The globalists aren't just presented as bad people. They are trying to be heroes. They are trying to do what's right. The nationalists are trying to do what's right. So it's a very fair perspective, and Vox really drills into the perspectives very well, and does and treats them, you know, as their three-dimensional characters, not just like cartoon villains. You don't just have a random swarm of bees that are attacking because they're a random swarm of bees, sort of thing. So that's another plus on the writing here. And then it ends with a cliffhanger of one of the Euro guys going after the nationalists, getting his butt kicked real quick, and that's it. So on this issue, you know, I already mentioned the rough art. I mean, you can see it. Yeah, there's not much to say about that other than, like, it's pretty stiff. The colors really have a lot of distracting issues at points. The writing is, you know, I mean, it's okay. But there's points where, like I said, it kind of bogs down in dialogue. I like the beginning in action. You notice there's a couple good pieces of action here, and there's mostly a complete story. Even though it's just a setup, you definitely feel something's coming, and there's enough of a hook here that it's worth reading on, basically, and on the story end, and that's what you want out of a first issue. So, get into the second. This is where you switch to the American front. You see completely different art, completely different coloring. This is beautiful art. This is something. This is definitely something that you would see in a Marvel or DC book. It's fine, or IDW or Dynamite or whoever. This is quality, and he obviously took the criticism to heart and then upped his game here. Again, this is a completely different story. So you get the artist Cliff Cosmic on the European stuff, and the line artist stays the same even though the colors changes, and you get Richard Bonk on the American stuff. So this is a completely different storyline, and it opens up with a guy beating up some illegal aliens who are hurting some kids. He takes the illegal alien to immigration. Vox gets a little too on the nose sometimes with, like, he has to go back. I know he's doing it to trigger people, but does get a little too on the nose, and it distracts sometimes. I won't lie on that. And we get some Antifa guys coming after him. He then gets rescued by this American front group, and it turns out there's some heroes who are, like, trying to go off the grid and fight back. Very compelling opening. So as much as that one dialogue piece, you know, might have been a little bit distracting, the opening was very compelling here, and such a huge upgrade after that first issue that you know, I wish this was the first issue. This is awesome stuff, because if people saw this and read this right here up to this point so far, they would be like, this is freaking awesome. And it honestly only gets better. I love the car drawing. Looks good. We have our gal, Rebel. And as you see, you know, this got in promo because of her Confederate flag bikini. They really threw a fit about this. Even though this is definitely like a Dukes of Hazzard throwback, this is not really saying anything other than she's a Bama girl. And get some Kid Rock lyrics and all that. Pretty funny. So she gets stopped by the police, who then are working with some feds who are after her because she's got some powers, it turns out. She's a damn strong woman, but she gets overpowered because that's how things work. And she gets thrown in prison. And what happens is our little rebellion heroes then decide to go rescue her. This is my favorite character in the whole deal right here. She goes by Cat, and she's got little cat ears. Of course, she's a cat girl. You know I'd love that the best. And she's got teleportation abilities. So I want a solo series of her, and totally available to write that if anybody's listening. All right. So this goes on, and they do the rescue. Our dude from the beginning now gets his hammer. Captain Hammer, he's our hero. Yeah, so he's got big Thor-like hammers. Very cool. And they go in, they bust this chick out, and then our little evil UN guys talk about what they need to do as a retribution to get back. And we end with Rebel being introduced to our little group there. Perfect issue. This issue was freaking awesome. So this is really what I wanted out of Alt Hero, and I'm glad that it then picked up from there. And it continues again with the American front on the 3rd issue. With Richard Bonk's art, we Rebels talking. Now again, Vox does have a propensity to go a little too talking heads with things, and so he sets things up for a few pages where I'd much rather them like dial into action. I always say that comics is an action medium, and we need a little less of this. Because you go from pure talking for 3 pages, into the mooks again talking for a couple pages, and they're both planning things. The Rebels are planning, they're planning their thing, and then these guys are planning to kidnap Rebels' parents, and they do that. And some funny dialogue in here. I love Rebels' parents. They actually came off as very good characters. And then these guys, our Rebel team, is going to do some stuff. Here's my gal again, cat. Yeah, I like when she makes appearances for obvious reasons. They go and try to... oh, shoot. Why? I need to get... Sorry, I'm a bad reviewer, guys. I need to get back into what this is about. What happened is the feds are actually kidnapping her parents, right? So these guys talk, and they're like, hey, we need to strategize back. And this is one of Vox's things where he's actually getting into a strategic point, which he talks about on his streams, and people wouldn't notice this if they don't watch Vox very often. But this is one of those 4th generation warfare things where it's like, if they're gonna, use chemical weapons on you, you can't just sit there and go, okay, that's bad, I'm gonna write you a strongly worded letter. Otherwise, they have no reason to stop, because they know it's effective on you, and they know that they're gonna kick your butt. So the way to stop them is to use chemical weapons back, and then they'll go, okay, we don't want that done on our people, so let's have a treaty now to stop this usage of chemical weapons. This is bad. Or say they're using human shields, right? They get a human shield out in battle, and you shoot the human shield. They know that's not going to be effective, so they'll stop using the human shields. And this is sort of the tactical thing that the Rebels are doing here. They know that they're going after the parents and families in order to try to get at them. So what they do is not acquiesce. They don't cuck out, right? They don't just go, oh my gosh, this is bad, and give up, which is what Vox is trying to get across in the message here. But instead, they go back and they kidnap the UN guys' families back, and eventually the UN guys go, okay, well, I guess families are off limits, and that's the deal with this issue. It's very good message on this part, and it doesn't interfere with the story. Like, there is that message there, but it's all tactical and philosophical. It happens, they do their thing, and they come back. And I say that the one critique of this issue is there's a lot of exposition just in terms of talking heads back and forth compared to issue 2. And Vox sometimes gets into that when he gets into his philosophical stuff. That's one of the things about the writing that I'd kind of pare down and get more into action is what I'd prefer. So while issue 2 was like perfect, issue 3 was still solid, but not quite as good as issue 2. Now we get back to the European front, and now that we've got all that set up, this becomes the most interesting issue of the European front. We have Paris, a beautiful drawing of Paris. Cliff Cosmic actually does pretty good backgrounds and landscapes, and this is with the new colorist. So you see the colorist is much better than he was before, and you see this is much more like classic comic fare with this new colorist. So Captain Europa is training a couple of these dudes. Gets a little cartoony on the art here, which doesn't quite match the nice scenery at first, and it's again, I just don't like Cliff Cosmic's art as much as I do Richard Bonk's art. So we get into this. Looks a little bit like Empowered, though. If you've ever read the Dark Horse series Empowered, these heroes look a lot like that. So this is, again, it's just a different style compared to before, and I think he has gotten better from issue to issue with less stiff movements, less stiff poses, and things like that look better than the first issue. And so Europe knows that Antifa is about to take to the streets. Here we go with Antifa. This is a beautiful crowd scene. It's very hard to draw crowd scenes, by the way. And they take to the streets, and the nationalists are going to go, you know what, we're going to go fight them like idiots, because that's what often happens. And then there's this big battle on the streets. So the new trainees come out, and they fight, and we have a lot of action in this issue. Again, I like the action. This is what I want. out of a comic book. It's not a novel. You want action out of comics, and you know, this is good stuff right here. And it goes all the way through the issue. The trainees don't do very well, so Captain Europa comes out and he fights the nationalist dudes, and he looks like he's winning. He's overconfident. You know, I think in the action you probably want less panels in this, because this is just a lot of talking back and forth. It's kind of devolving into that a little bit. You probably want some more dynamic panel layouts also. And I would say that detracts from the action at this point in the series. But it still works, and we get better on this page. Captain Europa then gets hurt, and we end there as he's kind of kicked out of the fight, and his little trainees are not doing so well. So that was a great issue of the European front, the best issue of the European front in my opinion, and a big pickup and big improvement from that first issue. So yeah, we've had 3 solid issues in a row, right after the first one, which really you know, needed a little more love. So yeah, learning from mistakes, getting better. That's what you got to ask as these things go along. London Calling's the 5th issue, and despite the name, it is actually an American front name. Starts out in London. Again, Vox gets a little too on the nose politically, with you know, immigrants stabbing a dude on a bridge. I mean, this is directly something that happened, not subtle at all at this point. Most of it's been pretty subtle, to be fair. I mean, we had the Antifa fight, but it didn't preach at you and didn't take sides or anything. Just the fight's going on. It is just part of the thing that's going on. We had that you have to go back panel that was rough, but that's about it. You know, for this many pages, you would expect, especially with a Vox Day comic, for it to be a lot more preachy than that, and it really wasn't. But still, I got to call out this part. This is a little too on the nose for me. And here is we got a new guy with powers, and what happens is the feds recruit him. Vox does this like girl kissy thing several times in the comic here. It's very interesting that this ends up in several panels. I don't know what to glean about that, but I don't know. All right. But here we go. And the Euros send that ice guy after the rebels. And again, like, this one bogs down a little bit, just a little bit in just like too much talking going on. And this is where Vox does get preachy, and he doesn't get preachy about like, you should vote for Trump. It's not that kind of preachy, but he's talking about like tactics and things like that. And I know this is important stuff to Vox. You know, for a comic, I would have pared all this down. But it's only a couple pages, and it gets back into the thing again. And we see Rebel in full costume now, and they're on an op, and then the feds send that ice guy on an op to then go attack our people and the vampire girl. Vampire girl's one of the fed people. And we get some action again, back into good fighting action. Things are back in their proper place again. This is all good stuff. You know, ice on fire. I love it. You know, that's just classic trope right there. And the one thing, like I said, I would have rather had an American volume and then a European volume, because this is where it ends on a cliffhanger, where it's like, this issue of all the issues really did not tell a full story. The first 2 American issues had their full story. Yes, they were continuing on. This one really, like, it just got to the fight and then it stopped. And you know, I criticize that. I would like to have a full American volume where it's where I've got the whole story, and then a whole European volume where I've got the whole story. And issue 6 suffers from that as well. So I believe that like 2 through 4 really were the best issues, and where this sets up something interesting, you can't, you know, you just didn't get the complete story, and it's going on. Now, here's the difference between what this is and what Cyberfrog was. While this stopped right here at a very interesting point, it gave you a lot in advance that was necessary and was its own story and was complete story. But not only that, but the campaign, the crowdfund campaign, was for 2 volumes of this. So there is another volume forthcoming. We were aware that the story wouldn't finish in the first volume from the get-go, and so it wasn't like a bait and switch where they just like go, oh, by the way, there's going to be a new volume coming later. There were 2 volumes mentioned in this campaign, so you can forgive the cliffhanger a little bit. I still would have preferred to have like more of a complete story for that issue 5. All right, and then we have the Dark Hunt. We are back to the European front, and I do find this to be a bit weaker than the American front. Issue number 4, Withstanding. There's a lot of dialogue exposition to open up this issue, and this one, Vox actually is telling jokes between characters, and he's kind of mocking this character and making some jokes here. The problem is it goes on for like 4 or 5 pages, and so 1 or 2 pages of that comic relief is fine, but to open an issue with that, little too much on that side before we actually get into what the story's about, which is our nationalists on the European side meeting up with a contact, going into hiding, and our globalists actually sent to hunt them down. Again, gets back to Cliff Cosmics art. It's it's just it's indie. It could be a little bit less stiff in these different spots. And so it's, I don't like it as much as the Richard Bonk stuff. And we go on, the chase starts to happen. It picks up big right here. And then from here forward, really the issue gets going again. And, they go through the catacombs. What I don't like about this issue is there's no real confrontation. You get a little bit of one, but it's really just, they get stopped and they're very easily disappeared, rather than instead of that first 5 pages up front, it would have been nice if all of this was a knockdown, drag out battle between these 2 forces, so we could really see the scale of things. We really didn't get a lot of that. They kind of just got stopped in the catacombs there, and the nationalists kind of just disappeared and then end up in their new home. So this one did have a complete story in that they were going somewhere, they were being attacked, and then they got out of it. A nice way to end this. But again, it's just like there could have been a little bit more compelling of a, I guess, build so we can know what the scope is and kind of be a little bit more prepared for what's about to go on. I would have preferred a little bit more action in those last 2 issues. I think issues 2 through 4 are really the gold standard of this. And because there's so many issues and so many stories and the 2 different fronts, it's a little hard to judge them together. So I'm going to judge them as 2 separate books. I will judge issues 1, 4, and 6 as the European front. And I think that, especially because of the beginning one where they first learned to make comics, this was really a letdown. But it definitely picked up, and things were a little bit better. Issue 6 had its issues, as I mentioned. Issue 4 was pretty darn good, one of the better ones of the volume. So overall, I think this was like a 6 out of 10 on the European front for the story side. The art is pretty rough on the European side, maybe a 5 out of 10 for that. Now, on the American side, it's quite different. The story was about dead perfect in issues 2 and 3. And issue 5, like I said, it's just got that cliffhanger and a little bit too much of the dialogue exposition. So this one on the story end is definitely an 8 out of 10. If you honestly, you can pick up single issues of these. If you pick up 2, 3, if you just want to check it out and not the other stuff, if you pick up 2, 3, 5, I think you'd really enjoy it just from that perspective. It's one of the better stories in Comicsgate on the American side, if not the best. So it's definitely up there. The art on that is pretty good. I think anybody would accept that in an IDW or Dynamite book, no problem. Marvel and DC, as long as it wasn't like, one of their major titles, would probably be fine too. So I'd call that a 7 out of 10 or even 7.5 out of 10 on the art side for 2, 3, and 5. So definitely getting better as things go along for the most part. Learned from that issue 1. The issue 1 did bring down the score for the European front a lot. But overall, this is a book that, you definitely, you get your value, you get your time, you get your story that's worthwhile. It's compelling, it's interesting, and it sets up a great world with a ton of characters that I'm very excited to dive into volume 2 and see where this goes. So I am excited for that to come. I also know that there's more to this world. because Chuck Dixon's been hired to write Alt Hero Avalon, and that's got some great art that like looks like an 80s comic, just like I like, and it reads like a Chuck Dixon comic, so of course it's about dead perfect. And then there's an issue of Alt Hero Q out, and Alt Hero Q issue number 1 might be the best issue of all of Alt Hero so far. So so as they're getting along, they are building a much bigger, broader world. They're making more comics. Each comic's getting better as it goes on. So you can't ask for more than that. So yeah, Alt Hero is here. As far as you know, it's ranking over that book. You know, it's big and hard over small and floppy. I'll see you guys.